Hello, and welcome to the first episode of Brian Kidd News Nostalgia. This is a very lo-fi channel. I'm mostly using it to present some newspaper articles that I find interesting that capture sort of the pop culture or zeitgeist of a certain time. So, as you see here for the description of the channel, this is kind of a quote from the article I'm about to read, and that's staggering into the zeitgeist. So this is my personal YouTube channel, but I have decided to dedicate it mainly to discovering and presenting old and interesting news articles that capture the zeitgeist of the time they were written. Okay, so the sort of impetus or inspiration for this channel came when I was looking at newspapers.com, and instead of looking up serious articles, political stuff, or things that I was researching, I thought I would do something a little more lighthearted and in the entertainment realm and look up different articles and pop articles from different times, entertainment articles. And I decided, I wonder what was being written about Nirvana around the time that the album Nevermind came out. Now, the album Nevermind came out on the same day, I believe, as the Red Hot Chili Peppers' Blood Sugar Sex Magic. So let's look that up really quick. What albums, right, were released on September 24th, 1991? Now let me get rid of this. Nirvana's Nevermind, the Red Hot Chili Peppers' Blood Sugar Sex Magic, and A Tribe Called Quest Low End Theory. Awesome. I love all those albums. Very cool. So those are the most famous ones, I suppose. There's the Pixies. They released an album then, and I think this is the Cult. I think that was on the same day. Was that? I don't know who this is, but I'm sure they're good. Brian Adams. So those were some of the most notable albums that were released that day. And by the way, I have a previous version of this video, but I decided now that I'm more informed, I'm going to redo it. Also, I'm trying to think of sort of a very lo-fi kind of way to do these videos and make them look at least somewhat aesthetically pleasing. I'm going to buy new lighting and a microphone and all these things, but for right now, we'll just keep it very, very bare minimum. So, this article appeared in The Province on Monday, January 27th, 1992. So that's over 33 years ago from the time that I'm recording this, which is on September 21st, 2025. So, I picked this article because I thought it was a really cool juxtaposition that Mr. Jim Sullivan and Steve Morse, what they created here, these two writers for The Province, was really entertaining, quite humorous, and quite insightful to the zeitgeist of the time of what people probably thought about Nirvana back then. So you have two titles here. You Give Us More Confusion and Hey Guys, Get a Life. So what this author over here is saying, hey man, give us more confusion. We like that. And then this author over here is saying, hey guys, get a life. So let's start out. Again, this newspaper is still around. It's still in publication online at least. And it's from Vancouver, BC, where they would pronounce Nirvana back then. So until the middle of last year, Nirvana was an obscure band in Seattle's underground rock scene. Now they're on the cover of dozens of magazines, as well as being #1 on the album charts. The best thing since Neil Young or the Rod McEwen of hard rock. Here are two love 'em and hate 'em views of pop's latest phenomenon. Now, first of all, let's look up Rob McEwen, because I was like, who is this Rob McEwen guy? I mean, they're dissing him throughout the entire article. Or is it Rob? I'm sorry, is it Rob? So they call it Rob McKeuen. Rod, not Rob. So I got a little dyslexic there. Okay, so who is this guy? And it's McEwen, K-U-E-N. Ronnie Marvin McEwen was an American poet, singer-songwriter, and composer. He was one of the best-selling poets in the United States during the 1960s. Throughout his career, McEwen produced a wide range of recordings which included popular music, spoken word poetry, film soundtracks, and classical music. So I fail to see why it would be sort of a bad thing to be considered the Rod McEwen of hard rock, but I need to look into that more. Here are two love 'em and hate 'em views of pop's latest phenomenon, as I said. So let's get for the first one. This is the love 'em, right? Give us more confusion by Jim Sullivan. So already, this is kind of a backhanded compliment, right? Give us more confusion. And then over here we have, hey guys, get a life. But let's read the give us more confusion. Okay. Jim Sullivan, Entertainment Newswire. They came out of nowhere, well, out of the Seattle underground rock scene to hit the top of the pops. Their anthemic sounding single, Smells Like Teen Spirit, an onrushing slab of punk rock, conjures images of apathy as it rails against the same. And it sure has captured the tenor of these tenuous times. Here we are now, entertain us, shouts, sings guitarist Kurt Cobain as the chaos begins to break loose around him. Out in the crowd we nod, or headbang along, semi-knowingly, we need bread, but hey, we'll take a circus. So here we go, the we need bread, but we'll take a circus. Now what does that refer to? So the phrase we need bread, but we'll take a circus is a modern variation of the Latin phrase panem et circenses. Now I never took Latin, but I know that pan is sort of like Spanish. If pan is Spanish for bread, and et is and, so that's interesting, and circenses is obviously circus. It suggests a tension between basic needs, bread, and the government's ability to distract or pacify the public with entertainment circuses. Interesting. I heard a different explanation before, but I'll take that. So basically they're saying it suggests a tension between basic needs and the government ability to distract or pacify the public with entertainment circuses. Okay. We'll get back. So what he's using that here as a convention to say, out in the crowd we nod or headbang along semi-knowingly we need bread, but hey, we'll take a circus. Now that is very interesting. Is that sort of a metaphor for we need one thing, but we'll deal with this circus? So this is supposed to be, remember, this is supposed to be the pro Nirvana guy, right? The guy that likes Nirvana. I find that an interesting way to express that. So I guess it's the idea of entertainment. Here we are now, entertain us, right? Give us a distraction from what we really need to survive, I suppose. Nirvana has risen up from America's underground and scaled the mountain of pop success. The top of the charts haven't been this much of a glorious mess since the Beastie Boys did it in 1985. And actually, it must have been 86. So this Jim Sullivan guy needs to get his dates correct because that's when License to Ill came out. So Nirvana, which includes Cobain. This is a very interesting way of writing here. Nirvana, Cobain, of course, the singer and guitar player, bassist singer Chris Novoselic, drummer singer David Grohl have staggered into the zeitgeist. And that's where I've got this kind of catchphrase. I think it's very catchy. Hence, that's his catchphrase. What's the key, I guess, to their success? A fusion of wit and anger, of pop punk and hard rock. When Nirvana writes and plays feels hard-bitten, real earned. Cobain's voice has a ragged, enduring, damaged quality. And Nirvana's music doesn't sound like something crafted for crossover appeal. Rather, it seems cut from the same aesthetic cloth that a much older exponent of tattered rock glory, Neil Young, talks about in last month's Tower Pulse. It's great to sell records, says Mr. Neil Young, but it's an accident. It should be an accident. And I think what he means is it shouldn't be calculated that you're making something that the public will consume in great numbers, right? Still a lot of units. Instead, it should be an accident. So it should just be that you're being genuine and putting out something that's artistic with artistic motivations rather than commercial motivations, I suppose. Although I have heard that Kurt Cobain purposely set out to create the perfect pop album, so to speak, or punk pop or rock pop album. So there's some irony there. Nirvana does not have a problem with hard rock pop hooks. Teen Spirit is the smartly arranged standout, but most of the 11 other tracks on Nevermind also hit some sort of caustic, cathartic climax. Profound? Not particularly, though the chillingly Polly digs deep into the mind of a rapist, I suppose. Mostly Nirvana's concept of rock and roll involves noise, agitation, and distortion. Wait till they hit her in utero a couple years later. They weren't the first to work this territory, of course, but they're the latest. He says they're the latest. And they do entertain us, however detached they might want to seem from the process. It would appear that the numbers of the disenfranchised rock populace has swollen lately. These people certainly make up a good chunk of the Guns N' Roses audience, and they are also buying and buying into Nirvana's Trip 2. But Guns N' Roses' primary source is Aerosmith, mainstream hard rock with a slight edge. However, Nirvana's roots are in bands like the Stooges, the Sex Pistols, and Flipper. Nirvana plays by its own decidedly non-PC rules. There are a lot of hard rocking ambiguity and few happy endings. Take the song Territorial Pissings, played on SNL and climaxing with an instrument destructo act. Yeah, it's been done. Is that really a reason not to do it again? Especially if you've been doing it on the club circuit. Nirvana starts by mocking the Young Bloods' utopian get-together. So that song has the melody, come on people now, smile on your brother, everybody get together, try to love one another right now. And of course it was sung, I don't know if it was David Grohl or Noah Shellick saying it, come on people now, smile on your brother, everybody get together, try to love one another right now. And then it breaks into something like this. From what I can recall, it's the and it goes, when I was an alien. And of course with Smells Like Teen Spirit, we have the right? And that riff sounds, of course, a little bit like Godzilla, maybe, from Blue Oyster Cult, or maybe it even sounds a little bit like More Than a Feeling by Boston. So Nirvana, they, from my childhood, from what I remember, they wrote songs that were pretty easy to figure out, but they were so clever, they were fun to play. So getting back to utopian get together, when Nirvana starts mocking the Youngbloods utopian get together and then slams into a speedy thrasher that speaks of optimism but sounds cheerily nihilistic. This is a band that has no problem with contrast, and I would say sarcasm and irony too. There are little things about Nirvana that give me a kick because they indicate these guys have the right attitude to the pop business game. The band members hugged and kissed during the SNL closing credits, thus possibly bugging latent homophobes in the hard rock crowd that's part of their new audience. So they're saying, okay, they would always say Nirvana would talk about these jock type people that would beat them up in high school, and now they start seeing them at their shows, and they thought that was kind of funny. And another thing, a little anecdote, is in my junior high school, I remember that there was a kid that wore a dress to school as an homage to Kurt Cobain and Nirvana, And it was cool. He made it cool to do something like that and to sort of make people um, sort of show his the idea that it's okay for a man to explore his feminine side, if you will. I guess it would be a boy at that time, for a boy to explore his feminine side. And there was a picture of him in our yearbook too, the person that did that. So that's pretty cool. Cobain's complaint and on a plane of what the hell am I trying to say? What the hell am I trying to say? Followed by the hopeful cry of, and then I'm done, then I can go home. There is nothing wrong with rockers who don't want to become spokesmen of their generation. Confusion has its place too. So now that I'm reading this for like the fifth time, I'm trying to figure out if this is really like a backhanded, this whole thing is like a backhanded compliment or something, because he's just basically saying that he's confused, but he doesn't mind it, and that there is some sort of mystique or allure to Nirvana that he just can't explain, and maybe that it has to do with a sort of callback to Iggy Pop or to Neil Young, mostly is what he's saying. I don't even think Iggy Pop comes up later, although, you know, there is the idea that they're influenced by, what does he say here? Because, you know, they're talking about their different influences, and that's the Stooges, the Sex Pistols, and Flipper. I would say the Pixies. Because, again, I think it was Chris Novoselic that said that Smells Like Teen Spirit was a Pixies ripoff, kind of. But, of course, a lot of people heard More Than a Feeling or Godzilla. So let's come over here. Okay, and let's talk about, this is supposed to be the guy that does not like Nirvana. Now, in here, I can't decide, again, now that I'm reading this for like the fifth time, if this guy really, I suppose he is pro Nirvana, and this person is saying, hey guys, get a life, by Steve Morse. People who are bored with the world usually make boring records. How else to explain Nirvana? They're the chic anti-hero band of the moment. They've released one great song, Smells Like Teen Spirit, which recently helped push the band's out of nowhere major label debut album to #1 on the charts, past U2 and Michael Jackson, and into the land of bona fide phenomena. Now let me read that sentence again, because every time I read it, it's such a mouthful. I'll start with this whole paragraph. They're the chic anti-hero band of the moment. They've released one great song, Smells Like Teen Spirit, which recently helped push the band's out of nowhere major label debut album to #1 on the charts, past U2 and Michael Jackson, and into the land of bona fide phenomena. Some critics are ready to canonize them, if just for being a fly in the face of corporate rock. But count me out. While I love seeing corporate rock thwarted as much as the next guy, I'm not ready to jump on Nirvana's bandwagon. And why not? Because most of Nirvana's Nevermind album is packed with generic punk pop that's been done better by countless acts, from Iggy Pop to the Red Hot Chili Peppers. Now remember, the Red Hot Chili Peppers released Blood Sugar Sex Magik on the exact day that Nirvana released Nevermind. So obviously this author, he enjoys that album more, supposedly, than Nevermind. And remember, that album had Under the Bridge and Suck My Kiss and Give It Away, Give It Away, Give It Away Now. And we'll get to that kind of style of Anthony Kiedis swagger in a second, because I found another funny reference in this article. We'll get to that. And because the band has little or nothing to say, settling for moronic ramblings by singer-lyricist Kurt Cobain, who has an idiotic tendency to sound like the Rod McEwen, there he is again, of hard rock. So, and because the band has little or nothing to say, settling for moronic ramblings by singer-lyricist Kurt Cobain, who has an idiotic tendency to sound like the Rod McEwen of hard rock. Wow. At least Cobain is honest in his song Breed. In the verse, I don't mind if I don't have a mind. Musically, the song is an Iggy Pop ripoff with a decent adrenaline rush, but like many Nirvana songs, it leaves you with a hollow, vapid, message. So vacuous, vapid, devoid of any sort of value. We don't have to breed. We could plant a house. We could build a tree. I don't even care, sings Cobain. Now, what's interesting about these lyrics, I thought they were miswritten, that they were misquoted, because I thought it would, we could build a house, we could plant a tree. But the lyrics are actually, we could plant a house, we could build a tree, I don't even care. And then, of course, he says, we could have all three. So Cobain, he wrote these lyrics, right? Sings Cobain, who must have spent hours coming up with these lines, right? The band didn't include a lyric sheet with the album, but I do think that they did include in that album, if I remember correctly, there was this sort of cool effect where you would read the lyrics and they looked like waves, kind of, and they would have quotes from all the different songs. The band didn't include a lyric sheet with the album, and for good reason. Here are a few showstoppers from Come As You Are. Come as you are, as you were, as I want you to be, hence the Rod McEwen analogy. Poor Rod, he's getting raked over the coals here. From On a Plane, I love myself better than you. I know it's wrong. What should I do? I mean, that's kind of a sleeper. That's what he's saying there. Zzz. Who are these guys anyway? They're three Seattle musicians who apparently love to reinvent themselves. They're known for fabricating phony biographical data, and even Time Magazine bit this week for the tall tale that they were once art students at Washington State. Now it's Washington State University over in Pullman, Washington, which is on the other side of the Cascades there. And which is interesting that they chose to say Washington State because Nirvana, they lived in Olympia for a while, so they could have said Evergreen State. But I digress. They could have said the University of Washington too, but they chose Washington State. Who knows what the truth is? Cobain also just told Spin Magazine that he grew up in a trailer park in Aberdeen, Washington, with his cocktail waitress mom, and didn't listen to rock and roll until later in life. I guess before that, maybe he was a huge, Beastie Boy fan or something. He was actually a battle rapper around Hopium. He'd have battle raps with other Aberdeen and Hopium rappers. And breakdancing contests, probably. No doubt Nirvana never intended their album to reach number one. It was marketed to both the metal and alternative markets, scoring a rare simultaneous success before sweeping out into the mainstream, enhanced by word of mouth and probably MTV, right? In this sense, the band followed with the same path that Jane's Addiction and Faith No More did last year. So, with Faith No More, with the Jane's Addiction and Faith No More. Now let's look up those bands real quick. Faith No More. I know they had a song called Epic, which was really popular, but I think that was released in '89. So here's their discography. So Angel Dust must have been the album that they're talking about, not The Real Thing, but Angel Dust. But that wouldn't be true because 91, it would have been The Real Thing. And that's where the song, Epic Song, I think Jane's Addiction was Ritual the Habitual, I believe. Addiction. So their discography. Ritual the Habitual, maybe? That's 90 or... Alright, so we'll keep going. But the reason I was going to bring up Faith No More here, or I was going to reference them, is because, remember, Mike Patton was being accused by Anthony Kiedis of stealing his style, right? Because he kind of had that hip-hop rap style that he was putting out, when he was saying, it was the song Epic, right? And so when Anthony Kiedis was singing, give it away, give it away, give it away now, right? And he had some other sort of hip-hop style-y previous to that, freaky style-y stuff going on in the Red Hot Chili Peppers in the previous years, right? But the Faith No More singer Mike Patton was biting his style, so to speak, within the song Epic. Right? That's what he was being accused of by Anthony Kiedis. So Mike Patton thought it was hilarious. And for good reason. I won't opine on that. I like them both, but Mike Patton is a bit of a better singer than Anthony Kiedis, I would say. Many people are touting Nirvana as original, but how original was it to go on Saturday Night Live last week and trash their instruments? Could someone please tell them that The Who and Jimi Hendrix did that 20 years ago? Now, technically, 1991, they would have been about 25 years previous to that. So the Monterey Pop Festival was in 67, and The Who played. They trashed their instruments, and then then Jimmy played, and he not only I don't know if the rest of the band, Mitch Mitchell and Noel Redding, trashed their instruments. I don't think they did, but of course that was the famous concert where Jimmy broke his guitar and then lit it on fire. The 1967 Monterey Pop Festival. The outrage was so dated and feebly enacted. Besides, no one could break instruments like Pete Townsend and Keith Moon, that they looked foolish. There they were, singing the line, "Gotta find a better way," than following a way that's as retro as it comes. Hey guys, save the money from trashing your instruments. Spend it on getting out and getting a life. So, and by the way, I read trashing as thrashing last night. It's funny how it could work either way, but I think that works better. So the mind, I have, looking at this article, sometimes I have the tendency to try to rewrite some of this, but it's really well written. Both of these articles are really fun to read. I would say, okay, so getting back out of this headspace and back into talking about this, the overall article itself. So remember, this was put out only about a few months. So in January, January, October, November, only about 3 or 4 months that album had been out, Nevermind had been out. And obviously these guys don't know what to make of it. I can't tell if they're being very sarcastic. In fact, I think that this article itself is something that Kurt Cobain would have thought was hilarious. So I wonder if he ever read it. And because it's very sarcastic, and it's almost like neither of these articles are really they're both kind of tongue-in-cheek, but they're both very funny. And it could have been that they did not know, they might not have thought that Nirvana deserved the notoriety that they were getting. I'm gonna take a guess that both of these writers are maybe boomers and not Gen X. It could be that could be the case, although and the reason I say that is because they bring up The Who and Jimi Hendrix, and they did it better, and they're bringing up Iggy Pop, although I don't know, this guy might be younger, or they might be both around the same age as Nirvana, and that's why they were asked to write the article. But at any rate, I really think that the vibe that I get is the zeitgeist, if you will, is that both of these writers almost think that Nirvana is sort of a racket, right? That they're not really sure what to make of them, and they think that it's just a bunch of hype, right? Like the documentary, right, where they're talking about grunge music. But I can tell you this much from what I remember being a kid back then. I remember spending the night at a friend's house, and I'll never forget it because his dad, who was a boomer, we were watching MTV, and Nirvana came on, and it was Smells Like Teen Spirit, and the dad was like, man, they're like a garage band. And then my friend at the time, who was more of a hip-hop fan, was like, yeah, I know. And secretly, I kind of liked it. I kind of kept it to myself because maybe I didn't want to be the lone wolf there. But Nirvana, I can use this analogy, and I truly think this is still true about Nirvana, that the Space Needle is to Seattle as Nirvana is to Seattle. It's just, they're just so, when I listen to Nirvana, it takes me back to that time. Being a kid and all the music that was involved in coming out of Seattle at the time, of course, like Soundgarden and Pearl Jam Alice in Chains, Mudhoney. So you have these other great bands. Some would even say bands that were technically better than Nirvana, but Nirvana just captured this vibe that's hard to explain. That certain bands have the chemistry to capture. It's like they do capture that vibe that of what's needed at that specific time, right? And an example of that, it's not even it's a chemistry, but it's also a composition. Because one time I saw a band called No Quarter, which was a Led Zeppelin cover band, and I saw them at some bar, some dive bar, and I was listening to the music. They do a really good job, so shout out to No Quarter. And I was thinking, this composition, music is so unique. It's almost hypnotic and entrancing. I was listening to this. They were playing Dancing Days, like Out on the Teals, or a song like oh God, what else did they cover that night? Even like Dazed and Confused, some of the earlier, stuff off the first album. Just there was a certain vibe and music and formula that was put together by that band. Just like Nirvana, I heard a Nirvana cover band once at this bar called The Common on Capitol Hill, and it was the same thing. They did a really good job, and there was this certain. It's hard to pinpoint what exactly it is, right? What is it, right? To quote Faith No More, we don't. It's hard to even put a word to it, but it's a certain frequency, a certain culmination of melody and vibe and music, and it just comes out the way it was written by Kurt. It just creates to me a very alluring sound, right? It wasn't the most complex sound, obviously. They weren't virtuosos, but the music itself really brings me back to the vibe and reminds me of that time of being a kid, living in Seattle, in the Seattle area, and just it's so great that I got to experience that as a young person. It really enriched my youth, I think. So not just the music, but just the attitude that they had, and that still carries over till today. I think Kurt's influence, his personality, and his music is still influencing artists today, for sure. So I will end it there. And the next video that I do, I'll probably get a better setup or whatever. I just wanted to kind of set it off with this article because I thought it was so funny and entertaining and interesting. What I'll do for the next is I'm gonna try to find some articles about New Orleans jazz and the kind of parody of that, which is Dixieland jazz, because I'm kind of interested in the inception of jazz from the New Orleans Storyville era, and what was kind of being written about it, right? Kind of like with Nirvana, it was a newish sound. What were they saying about New Orleans jazz and guys like Louis Armstrong, the stuff that was coming out of that time, right? So that's going to be my next video. So I hope you enjoyed this. Again, this channel is just kind of a low-key, relaxed kind of vibe. Just looking at newspaper articles, which I love to read old newspaper articles, and most of them will just have to sort of be in the arts, most likely. I might cover some other things. I don't want to get too far into politics on this channel, but just sort of pop culture in general, and what was going on at certain times in the United States and maybe in other places of the world over the last 200, 150, I guess 100 to 200 years even. If obviously print, I could probably only find stuff from about 100 years ago, maybe 150 years ago. So whatever I can find on newspapers.com or other publications that I find interesting, I will present. All right, thanks again. And if you like this video, go ahead and like it or subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Hope you enjoy your evening or your day or whatever time of day it is. Hope you enjoy this video. How should I end these videos? I will just say, I like to say this. This is Brian Kidd with Brian Kidd News Nostalgia signing off. Bye-bye.